Chatham is going to get the win. Back on the 2. Walden on the 3. Oh.
Okay guys, we got the fuel system all set up and working again. The throttle works, the start and stop button works. I got electrical. I've got all my vent lines properly routed going into the right tubes. We've got oil in the engine. The radiator has a hole in it, so we're waiting for that epoxy to dry on that radiator. That'll probably be tomorrow before that's done. So for right now, just to fire this thing up and test run it, I put a hose over from that outlet on the coolant tube to this one, and I got just enough coolant in there to lubricate the water pump. I'm not running the engine long enough to overheat it. That's not why I did that. I did that just to have some coolant down there lubricating that water pump. That water pump's been sitting there all winter. So I took a funnel, turned this up like this, filled it up so there's coolant in the system that'll circulate. And we don't need to run it long. We just need to run it long enough to hear it and make sure it's hot on both pipes, right? So next step is get a little gas in this thing, get the carburetor primed up. Okay, I got just enough gas in there to let this fuel system prime this carburetor up. I put about maybe a half gallon or a gallon in there, and we'll prime these carbs a couple times. They might leak from the bowls. Sometimes these gaskets sit around for a few months. They get dry and they get small and shrink and they don't seal as well. So we'll just put enough gas in here to run this thing a little bit and see what happens. Look for leaks and whatnot. So here we go. We're going to prime it. This is a vacuum operated petcock. There's the vacuum fitting and there's the fuel fitting. So when the engine's running and it's sucking on that diaphragm back there, it allows gas to get to the engine. But we're going to bypass that and prime it. We'll watch that filter, see if that filter fills up. Yep, there's the gas flowing. I don't know if you can see it inside of there. It's kind of an opaque filter. It's not real clear and easy to see, but it's definitely filling up. Now, as we see that stop moving and there's no more displacement bubbling up going through there, then what we should do is look for leaks and see if anything's coming out. And I don't see any. So we'll go ahead and turn this back off to the on position. And you say, why would you turn it off by putting it on? Well, because when it's in the on position and the engine's not running, there's no vacuum to the diaphragm, and that does in fact turn it off. So by turning it on, we turned it off until we start it, and then it'll turn itself on with vacuum. All right, so we got a tight exhaust. I torqued all those bolts down. I got this bracket bent up here in the back to a better place where he had crashed it and mashed all this stuff in together. I got that all fixed up. It's sticking out a little far. Maybe when we're riding it, it might drag the track a little bit. If so, I'll bend it up, twist it up a little bit better. But we got oil in the engine. We got coolant in the engine. And we're not going to run it long enough to need a radiator. I put this catch bottle on it, because as the engine heats up even the smallest, littlest bit, it's going to build some pressure, and it's going to spit that pressure out that cap. So, and when that happens and that cap opens, it's going to fill this up with coolant. So, all right, let's go ahead and fire it up and see if she starts okay and gets hot on both pipes. Put you over here by Gumby. Here, Gumby, you do the camera. Now there is a working choke circuit in these carburetors, but I don't run any cables to it and use it, because all you got to do to choke these carburetors is cover them with your hand. It's wide open, there's no filter. They're just wide open bore carburetors. You just put your hand over top of them and that chokes them. Yeah, there we go. It's already trying to start. I choked it by letting it suck through, letting the engine turn over, and letting it suck through with my hand on the bells of the carbs, and that increased vacuum by closing off the air made it wet with liquid. I could already feel the gas spurt up on my hand. So we're already choked. She should fire right up. There we go. There we go. Let's make sure we're hot on both cylinders. I feel heat there. on that side. I feel heat building on that side. So we are idling on both jugs. So I'm not going to run it long because I don't have a radiator on it, but let that water pump circulate. Get the oil splashed around them, drain into a oil change. And the oil's pumped up out of the sump. It's pumping up through this feed tube into the top of the cams. I can tell that because I can hear there's no valve hash noise up there. And we went ahead and we ran it long enough to know everything's going to be okay. But not long enough to get it hot because, of course, it doesn't have a radiator. That little bit of time wasn't even enough to open the thermostat in any way, shape, or form. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get a drain pan under this and let all that old oil leak out. Remember when before we started it, the oil level was to the center and settled here. So why is it low now? You say, oh, your engine's out of oil, you're out of oil. No, I'm not out of oil. It's really cold. That oil is cold and viscous. It's about 50 degrees in here. See, I got the heater running. And that 50-degree oil was thick and it pumped up into the top of the head and it's trapped up there now. And this engine needs to get warmed up and that oil needs to get warmed up before it'll properly leak down and displace. If I let this engine sit for 20-30 minutes, you're going to see the oil creep right back up to where it was. It's going to creep right back up to mid-glass. The reason it's missing now is because it's trapped up in the head. It's real thick. It can't flow back down. The engine's not running. Nothing's warm. So that's good, though. That also tells me my oil pump is working. Because if the oil pump wasn't working, it wouldn't have taken about a quarter of a quart and just placed it up into the top of the head. So we didn't lose that quarter of a quart of oil or half quart of oil. We just moved it. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and drain the oil and the coolant that's in it. We know everything runs. We know that we're not leaking gasoline. I don't see any gas strips coming down out of there. I don't see any leaks at the hoses or the fittings. So we're going to go ahead and wait for the epoxy on this radiator to harden up tomorrow, and then I'll throw this radiator on and we'll be good to go. Overnight, I'll put my little carburetor caps on. These little VP caps are perfect size to cover up the backs of these carburetor mouths. Okay, let's talk about aerodynamics for a second on these race bikes. Modern day ram air systems go in the front and they go through the frame, or in the 90s they went around the frame into the airbox. Nowadays they go through the frame, and then inside behind that frame is another mouth, another snorkel, and a rubber foam piece, and it pressurizes this airflow into the airbox and feeds the air system with pressured air. And of course, because it's fuel injected and you add air, that means you have to up your fuel map and all that stuff, and that's where O2 sensors come into play, and or custom maps, and or blah blah. So how do we do it with the vintage bikes? How do we do it with old school technology? If you look at this bike, those carburetors are sucking air from behind that engine. There's nothing feeding that. There's no air portal or ram air box. There's no tube taking air from the front of the bike and putting it into that intake. So what we do is we take this air dam right there and we put that air dam straight back behind the carburetor, because all the air that flows into that area of the bike is going to stall right there. It's going to stall where my hand is because of that backboard. Okay? And that stalled air is going to travel with the bike. So even though the bike's going 104 miles an hour, that's the top speed on this ultralight, even though this bike's going 104 down a long straightaway, it's still got nice, good, clean, still air to catch and to vacuum into those carburetor intakes, okay? The other thing that this back wall does, besides stilling the air and giving the carburetor something to feed, is it keeps dirt and dust out from off the back tire. If you look at the back tire here throwing dirt forward, or rain, if you're racing in the rain or whatever, it's going to hit this foam. This foam's designed to do two things. It keeps the battery from jiggling around when you mash it in there real tight. Plus, It's also a water dam and dust dam to keep dust from going over the top of the battery, bouncing off the seat, and then making its way into the carburetor. So I jam that foam in there so that nothing can come off this back tire and get into those intakes, okay? Now, it's not perfect, you know, a bug or probably not a rock, it would weigh too much, but a bug or a small piece of dirt debris could float through the front of the bike, float around here, get trapped back here, and kind of do like it does in the back of your pickup truck. When you look out the back window of your pickup, you see leaves floating around following the truck down the road. That probably does happen to some extent, and then some of it does probably get sucked into the engine. I haven't had a problem with damaging valves with big debris getting in there. I just haven't had that problem because we're usually racing on nice, clean, wide open road race tracks. If you crash the bike in the gravel and you pick your bike up out of the gravel and your bodywork has collected a bunch of gravel down in the pan, right? It's laying down in the pan of the bike. And there's gravel and dirt and debris and mud all up in here where you crashed in the gravel and the dirt and the debris and the mud, then you don't want to really race the bike until you get a chance to put these caps back on the carburetors and then hose all that stuff off. I just take, you know, hoses and clean all the loose stuff out of there. And then, you know, that's the other thing these caps work really great for, is you can cover the bell mouths of those carburetors when you're washing the bike and get all that schmuck out of there. So, all right, guys, that's the dual purpose of this aerodynamic back wall. It not only keeps dirt from the back wheel shooting into the carbs, but it also stills the air and pushes the air down the track with the bike to help the carburetors suck up. I've actually had to change jet sizes on bikes that had this, and I've changed jet sizes on bikes that didn't have this, because you get more air when you hold the air up towards the carburetor. Probably the best thing for me to do if I had time to manufacture it, and I love you, George, but I don't have time right now, maybe this will be a future project, is we can run plastic or carbon fiber or some kind of a fiberglass mold or mold a box or something to fit in there and move this vent line out of the way, and just put a U-trough in there so that even the sides would be closed. And that way it's scooping air as it moves forward, okay? It would not catch enough air to slow the bike down because the aerodynamic print of the front of the vehicle would not change. And that's what you need to appreciably slow the bike down. You're not really building a parachute, so it's not going to slow you down the way you might think it would. And it would probably be a really good idea to help even breathe it better. But for now, that's what we got. We got a back wall still in the air, giving that an area to zone. And having open sides like that, it lets rocks and bees and bugs and stuff come out. It keeps, you know, if you build too much of an air dam, now you're going to start catching particulate and breathing particulated air, and that's not good for it either. So, all right, guys. Tell George when you see him I ran his bike today, and I'll get the oil out of it. I'll get these coolant hoses off and get that radiator fixed. And I got some fresh oil and filter coming for it. A straight handlebar where I got to fix that. And we'll get the bodywork back on here, and this thing will be ready to race here in another weekend. All right, guys. God bless. I love you. Wear your helmets. Gumby says goodbye. Okay, guys. Got a radiator system all back on there. Got overflow wired up to it. I've got to put this little red cap back on later. That takes the space up between here when I finish flushing that. But I got red line water wetter bubbled up in the system. I ran it for a while. Let the bubbles come out. Let's see where we're at now. Yep, pretty much topped off there. I'll take this red line water wetter to the track because you know, you don't want to just put straight water in your cooling system. You need something that's going to have some lubrication property to it. There's no antifreeze in red line water wetter. There's no antifreeze to it at all, but it does have a lubrication property to it, and that's important for your water pump seal and whatnot. So This one here is just water. I flushed it out with that. Whenever you build an engine, flush it with straight water first. Just get that, all the junk and dust and boogers and whatever else is in there. Just get all that stuff out of there with the water. And after you flush it, then go back and put your good chemicals in your radiator system. Got this battery charging. I started it and ran it and started it quite a few times, on and off, bubbling it out. And I beat that battery down a little bit, so we're charging that back up. But we're all set and ready to rock, guys. All set and ready to roll. We'll get the front fender on there, and that fender will keep the brake line from touching the tire. We got this brake line away from the tire in the back. And don't know if I'm going to have time this year to paint it and do any kind of cosmetic work. Don't know if I have the energy or the time to get that done, but she'll be safe and reliable and ready to race. All right, guys, let's go put brakes on a Chevy van.